Let's see what Dogen has to say about my video where I discussed his Japanese.
むしろ、その上位には外国人っぽいアクセントがありますかっていう質問自体がバカバカしいというか、
Joey is a native Japanese speaker who mostly grew up in Australia with a Japanese mother and Australian father. In my original video, I said I didn't detect any obvious accent. Is it rude to discuss his accent? Potentially. Is it pointless? Absolutely not. Human language is complex and having native pronunciation isn't a black and white thing. Japanese people who grew up abroad or grew up bilingual can very much have a kind of foreign quality in their Japanese. Here are some examples.
やっぱ日本語を喋ってるとね、なかなか分かったらもう英語で喋ってくれない人が結構多い。
でも例えば小学校の時に低学年の子とかになんでそんな肌黒いのみたいなことを聞かれたりとか。
Both of them grew up in Japan, and the first one is bilingual, and he went to American school. The second person is mixed race, but he only speaks Japanese because his American dad wasn't very present in his life. The first person has a noticeable accent, while the second person just completely sounds native, which makes total sense. But they're both considered native speakers. So you can be a native speaker and sounds a little foreign, which of course isn't a bad thing. But I've also come across some Japanese Americans who have absolutely no trace of a foreign accent.
今日は細かいところ攻めていきたいと思います。今日攻めたいのは、日本で生まれてアメリカで
He sounds like he hasn't even left Japan.
そこら辺の日本人より上位の方がずっと上だと思うんですね。その話し方とか、
So the reason why I included Joey was because I want to talk about some of the misconceptions that people have about native speakers. Some people seem to think that if you are a native speaker, you are automatically better than non-native speakers. Nothing could be further from the truth. People also often underestimate how much effort you need to be proficient in your own language. Native speaker simply means that you learn a certain language when you are still a baby. Up to what age is subject to debate. But it doesn't say anything about how much time you spend to learn the language. Let's think of a Japanese person who grew up in an English-speaking country. This person only speaks Japanese at home with their parents. They're not interested in Japanese culture, so they don't consume any Japanese media. This person's Japanese is not going to be as good as somebody who grew up in Japan only speaking Japanese. Logic. But they might actually sound native when they speak Japanese. They have native pronunciation and native grammar. Again, being a native speaker doesn't necessarily mean that you speak that language well. But with Joey, I think he made a significant amount of effort learning Japanese apart from speaking it with his mom. For example, I think he's read a lot of Japanese manga with complex storylines and advanced vocabulary. And I think he mentioned learning kanji by himself. Without making these efforts, he wouldn't be speaking Japanese the way he does. And some Japanese people who grew up in Japan have very questionable comprehension skills. Somebody like Dogen can actually have better comprehension skills, especially when it comes to formally written texts. Not every Japanese person has good Japanese skills. Only the ones who have.
その話しているところを聞くと、この人マジで頭いいなっていうのがもうすぐわかるんですね。
Dogen and I agree on this. But do you know who else I think is intelligent? Dogen. All of the individuals I discussed in my video are intelligent. I chose them because I didn't have to say anything really negative about them.
確かにゆうたさんが言ったように、その自分の意見を努力せずにっていうか自然に自分
So I used the word effortless. And I think he tried to translate the word into Japanese, 努力せずに, and he realized that's not how we phrase this. So he changed it to a more natural expression, 自然に. That's how good his Japanese is. But actually, when I said effortless, I was only thinking about pronunciation. I feel like there's a little bit of stiffness when he speaks Japanese, but this is very subtle. Actually, I think it's more noticeable with my English, because even if I pronounce words correctly, it doesn't sound as smooth as native speakers. My English muscles are not fully developed because I didn't grow up speaking English. So I think his Japanese has a similar kind of stiffness, but to a lesser extent. I don't think I'm at his level with my English, unfortunately. Also, good pronunciation doesn't necessarily mean good language skills. Komi is a native Japanese speaker with native pronunciation, but her speaking skills are not exactly top-notch. So I absolutely didn't say that Matt's Japanese is better than Dogen's. I honestly don't know.
と思うんですね。ただしここでどうしても言いたいことがあって、でそれは何かというと、勝っているところは多分一つだけあって、でそれは何かというと、上手さです。
I love this joke. I like how it's super high context. It's like an insider joke of the online Japanese learning community. But you know what I noticed from this video? He explained himself very well in Japanese with his near native pronunciation and perfect grammar. And he even delivered a good joke. That's more than what many native Japanese speakers can do. So he can speak Japanese better than many native Japanese speakers in some situations. And his Japanese is indeed jozu. But you know what's more jozu than his Japanese? My English. So you should eigo jozu me. And if you want to be as jozu as Dogen, I will teach you the kind of Japanese that real-life Japanese people today actually speak, because textbooks and apps can be unnatural and outdated. So click the link and subscribe to my email group, Japanese with Yuta.